59. Organization of a convention of an established society. Most conventions must operate on a closely controlled schedule and transact a large amount of business quickly, often with rented facilities available only for a prearranged length of time, and with each added day of meetings entailing considerable expense both to the association and to the delegates personally. Maximum effort toward a well-organized convention is therefore essential. Advanced preparation. The work of organizing and preparing for a convention normally begins weeks or months in advance and involves many committees under the general direction of the officers and the board of the association. The principal parliamentary functions most directly connected with the formal organization of the convention itself are performed by 3 committees, each of which has been appointed by the president or the board as prescribed in the bylaws. These 3 committees are 1. The Credentials Committee, which prepares and certifies to the convention the list of officers, delegates, and alternates that it has registered after finding them entitled to accreditation. 2. The Committee on Standing Rules, which drafts rules of operating procedures specifically required for the particular convention. And 3. The Program Committee, which works out a convention program combining a suitable order of business, 41, with special features designed to promote and develop the association or society as a whole. Because the duties of these committees are exacting, a member should never be appointed to one of them for any other reason than his ability in the field involved. In addition, depending on the size of the convention, 1 or more committees concerned with the necessary physical arrangements, such as securing the hall, hotel accommodations, and related services, should be appointed. If a single committee is responsible for all of these matters, it may be known as the Convention Arrangements Committee. Another important committee that usually works before as well as during the convention is the Resolutions Committee. This committee screens and recommends appropriate action on resolutions and original, as distinct from incidental, main motions that come before the convention. The duties of the convention committees are more fully explained in the succeeding portions of this chapter. Each of the regular standing committees of the association, in consultation with the presiding officer, the executive body or board, and the program committee, should also carefully plan the presentation and management of the convention business that is a particular committee's concern. A pre-convention meeting of the board of the association is often held in the convention city a day or more in advance of the convention opening. A number of decisions bearing on business to come before the convention may be made at this meeting. Services of a parliamentarian. A key consultant in the preparation for a convention should be the parliamentarian, who should be engaged well in advance. It is desirable that this person be a professional. The more seasoned in actual operating experience within organizations, the better. Although he has the duty of giving parliamentary advice and opinions at convention meetings, where he should be seated next to the presiding officer, the parliamentarian's most important work may well be performed before the convention opens. See 47, 46 through 54. During the period of preparation and while the convention is in progress, he should serve as the principal advisor to the president, the officers, and the committee chairman regarding management of the convention as it relates to the actual transaction of business. The chairman of the Credentials Committee, the Committee on Standing Rules, the Program Committee, the Resolutions Committee, the Elections Committee if there is one, and the standing committees who are to present business to the convention should all consult with the parliamentarian during this time, and it may be advisable that he should attend certain meetings of these committees. The parliamentarian should always be present at the pre-convention board meetings mentioned above. Formal organization procedure at the convention. Before a convention can transact any other business, it must officially form itself into a single voting body, which is done at the first business meeting. Preliminary ceremonies, whether at the commencement of the convention or at the beginning of each day, are not regarded as business. A separate formal opening of inspirational nature can be held, if desired, before the convention is officially organized. When the assembly of delegates of an established society has been so organized in accordance with the bylaws or other governing rules as described below, it then acts as and in the name of the whole society and may be referred to as the 10th Annual Convention of the National Society of Blank, or, as common formally, the National Society of Blank and Convention assembled. The official organization of the convention is brought about by the separate consideration and adoption of the reports of 3 committees mentioned above, the Credentials Committee, the Committee on Standing Rules, and the Program Committee, in that order. As each report comes up for consideration, it is presented to the convention by a reporting member, normally the respective committee chairman. This person concludes his report with a statement that, by direction of the committee, he moves its adoption, unless he is not a voting member of the convention, in which case anyone who is such a voting member can make this motion. A convenient practice is for the recording secretary of the convention or a qualified member of the committee to do so. No second is required if the motion is made by a member of the committee. If no one offers the motion properly, the chair can call for it or can assume it by stating, for example, the question is on the adoption of the report of the program committee. Each of these committee reports is debatable and amendable. In an ordinary convention of a society, however, debate or proposals for amendment of any of them seldom occur, and the reports are likely to be adopted without dissenting vote, if the committees have done their work well. The vote required for their adoption is a majority for the reports of the Credentials Committee and the Program Committee, and normally a two-thirds vote for that of the Committee of Standing Rules, as explained in 59, 34 through 35. With the adoption of these three separate reports, the convention is officially organized for conducting business. Responsibilities. The specific duties of the Credentials Committee are listed below. Items 1 through 4 must, of necessity, be spread over a considerable period of time in advance of the convention. Items 5 and 6 must be performed at the convention location during the period leading up to the convention opening. Items 7 and 8 relate to the committee's duties during the convention. 1. Distribution well in advance to each constituent body entitled to representation of A. Information in accordance with the bylaws as to the authorized number of representatives and alternates, eligibility requirements, and the time and manner of their election. Note, some organizations include this information in a printed general call to convention, back to reading, and B. Credentials forms with instructions that they are to be returned by a specified date after having been filled in with the names of the representatives and alternates designated by the constituent unit, and having been signed by the unit secretary and sometimes also by its president. A single form can be used for all representatives and alternates, or a separate form in the form of a card can be used for each delegate and each alternate, with different colors to distinguish delegates from alternates. If alternates are paired with specific delegates as described in 5815, double cards can be used. 2A. Examination of all forms returned to verify the eligibility of each member listed, and B. Notification to the proper constituent unit whenever an elected delegate or alternate is found ineligible through non-payment of dues, insufficient duration of membership, etc., advising the unit of its right to designate one of the elected alternates named on its credentials form to take the place of any ineligible delegate, unless replacement is automatic because of pairing of alternates with individual delegates. 3. Compilation of the list of members entitled to register and the basis of this right. Officer who is a convention member ex officio, unit president, elected delegate, alternate, etc., arranged for quick reference, as alphabetically by districts, clubs, sections, or as may be suitable. Arrangements for registration to take place. 4. Arrangements for registration to take place at the convention, beginning 1 or 2 days before the convention opens, see 5916. 5. Registration, which normally includes these steps. A. Submission by the member intending to register of evidence that he is entitled to do so. B. Verification by the committee or a subcommittee of it that the member's credentials are correct. C. Recording of the member as officially registered upon his paying the registration fee, which is sometimes sent in advance, and signing a list of registrations. And D. Issuing of the particular badge to which the member is entitled, the official program, and additional necessary information, such as time and place of individual section or committee meetings or workshops. 6. Preparation of the committee's first report to the convention, which can include registrations only to such an hour as will enable the chairman of the Credentials Committee to present this initial report as the first item of official business at the convention. 7. Continuation of the committee until the convention ends, to record changes in the registration rules occasioned by A. Additional registrations, which the bylaws of the convention standing rules 5927 and following may require to be closed at a specified time slightly earlier than the final adjournment, or B. The departure of delegates and the re-registration of alternates who replace them. 8. Submission of a supplementary credentials report at the beginning of the first business meeting each day and at other times when required, as resulting from changes in the registration rules. In societies that maintain a permanent administrative headquarters, most of the clerical duties required of the Credentials Committee in advance of the convention usually develop into a routine technique preserved from year to year and performed largely by the regular paid staff, but the authority and responsibility for general direction of this work remain with the Credentials Committee. Times and place of registration. The times and the place of registration should be announced in the printed convention program. In a convention of any size lasting for a number of days, registration may begin 1 or 2 days before the convention opens, and provision should be made to handle a heavy volume of registrations during the afternoon and evening before the opening business meeting, as well as on the morning of that meeting. This registration normally takes place in a separate room or hall whose size and equipment depend on the probable total number of registrants. Throughout the convention, a registration desk of the Credentials Committee in a convenient location should be manned a reasonable time before each business meeting begins, and should always remain open during meetings. Near the end of the convention, usually only 1 or 2 committee members stay on duty. Method of registration. The method used by the Credentials Committee to register the delegates and alternates will vary according to the size of the convention. Our procedure in common use is outlined as follows. The entire association holding the convention is divided into parts, such as states, districts, or countries, and a separate section of the register, often prepared in triplicate as noted below, is set up for each subdivision. Each section of the register contains, arranged in appropriate logical order, the type names of the constituent societies or units located within the corresponding geographical area, and under each unit's name are typed alphabetically the names of the delegates and alternates that have been sent in on the unit's credentials blanks, provided that these persons have been found eligible by the committee. During the initial period when the bulk of registrations take place, usually 2 committee members are assigned to a separate and conspicuously marked table or station for each section of the register. In a large convention, ushers may be helpful in guiding delegates and alternates to the proper section, where they present their credentials and sign the register to the right of their typewritten names. At least one, and frequently two, duplicate registers or photocopy reproduced sets of the register pages are desirable in addition to the Credentials Committee's master copy. One duplicate list to be submitted as an attachment to the committee's report, the other for later use by election tellers in verifying the eligibility of voters. By use of the latter copy, counting procedure in an election can be expedited by dividing the tellers into subcommittee groups for each section of the register, according to the same pattern as in the case of the Credentials Committee's members during registration. The delegates' badges can also be correspondingly labeled or numbered to facilitate identification with the correct section. Cases of contested seats in a delegation will seldom arise except in political conventions. In the rare event of a contest between two delegates or group of delegates and serious doubts which is entitled to be seated, the committee should omit both from the list and report the fact of the contest to the convention as explained below. If, on the other hand, after hearing the facts, the committee thinks the contest is not justified, it should enter on the list only the names of the delegates whose claim it finds to be legitimate. The same rules apply to the more common case of delegates chosen by a local unit that is not entitled to representation or has chosen delegates in excess of its entitlement. Adoption of report. Before the Credentials Committee report is adopted, since the membership has not been established, the only motions that are in order are those relating to its consideration or to the conduct of the meeting before its adoption, as well as those that are in order even in the absence of a quorum, 46 through 8. Note, but see 60 for necessary variations in case of conventions not of a permanent organization. Back to reading. Even, for example, a motion relating to the validity of the holding of the convention is not in order at such a time. It is, therefore, essential that the committee establish and hold itself to a deadline for registrations to be included in the first report, which will leave it time to prepare that report. The opening ceremonies will afford some opportunity for this work, and while it is in process, delegates can continue to register, but not to be included in the committee's initial report. If the report is not ready in time, the convention may continue with other non-business matters, such as speakers, or may stand at ease or take a recess. The Credentials Committee report, which is read by the committee's chairman, states in substance that attached is the list of the names of the voting members of the convention and their alternates who have been registered up until, and then indicating the hour to which the list is corrected. This statement should be followed by whatever statistical summary is customary in the particular organization, frequently including a breakdown according to basis of voting membership as explained in 5914.3, and always gives the total number of convention members entitled to vote and the number of registered alternatives. Normally, the list of delegates and alternates is not read unless a portion of it is read upon request for information. If there is an unresolved contest between delegates, the particulars is stated, as well as the fact that the names of the contesting or contested delegates do not appear on the roll. The committee chairman concludes the report by saying, "On behalf of the committee, I move that the roll of delegates hereby submitted be the official roll of the voting members of the convention." The report with the attached list of names is then handed to the chair or to the secretary. Unless there is debate or proposed amendment, the chair, before taking the vote on the adoption of the report, asks, "Are there any questions on the report?" If seat or seats are contested, an amendment can be offered substantially in this form: to amend by adding, provided that the name of George J. Morris be added to the roll of delegates as submitted as a delegate from the state of Missouri. The name of the rival delegate can then be offered in a secondary amendment, for example, to strike out George J. Moose and insert Frank Norton. Whether or not a contest is reported, it is in order to move such amendments or even to move to substitute an entirely different set of delegates for any delegation in the reported list, but no such amendment is permitted to include more names than those of a single challenge delegate or delegation, all of whom are challenged on the same grounds, together with any claimants involved. On an amendment proposing changes in the list of delegates, none of the delegates involved in the case can vote. Those seated by the committee, though contested in a case not yet reached, can vote on all cases except their own. On the question of adopting the Credentials Committee's reports or on motions connected with its consideration, only those persons whose names are on the list of voting members reported by the committee, as this list stands after any amendment already approved by the convention, are entitled to vote. Roll of voting members and supplementary reports. When the report of the Credentials Committee is adopted, it is thereby ratified as the official roll of voting members of the convention, subject to changes through later reports. A voting member who registers after the submission of the first report assumes his full status as soon as he has done so, if his status is not questioned. If it is, he must await a decision by the committee or the convention itself. Although the Credentials Committee normally makes a supplementary report only at the beginning of each day, it may be called upon to do so at other times, such as immediately before an important vote, If there has been no change in the role of registered delegates since the last report, no motion or vote is required. But if there are changes, the committee chairman concludes his report by saying, "On behalf of the committee, I move that the revised roll of delegates hereby submitted be the official roll of voting members of the convention." Although this motion might appear to be one to amend something previously adopted, 35, it requires only a majority vote for its adoption, since it is always understood that the roll will be altered as delegates arrive late or leave early, and alternates may therefore be shifted in status. The Credentials Committee's master role of currently registering voting members of the convention must be maintained at all times in such a way that their exact number can be promptly determined. Accuracy of the list of registrants is essential, since it may affect the outcome of elections or closely contested issues. If the bylaws or the convention's standing rules do not prescribe a quorum, 40, which they should do, the quorum is a majority of the number of voting members who have actually registered at the convention is in attendance, irrespective of whether some may have departed. Committee on Standing Rules. Responsibilities. The Committee on Standing Rules drafts and submits for consideration a group of rules known as the Standing Rules of the Convention, which, as adopted, will apply to that one convention only. These rules must in no way conflict with the bylaws of the Society, but, in contrast to ordinary standing rules in the local society, they can involve modifications of rules contained in the parliamentary authority prescribed by the bylaws. The standing rules of a convention usually contain both parliamentary rules relating to the conduct of business and non-parliamentary rules, so that in some ways they resemble a combination of special rules in order and ordinary standing rules. 2. Since their effect expires at the close of the session that adopts them, however, they differ from either of the latter types of rules in certain respects. The standing rules of successive conventions held by a society often become developed to a point where little change in the rules adopted by the preceding convention is necessary. On the other hand, the work of this committee may sometimes require extensive research into past proceedings of the organization. In any case, the parliamentarian should always be consulted regarding the convention's standing rules, and he often prepares a first draft for submission to this committee. A copy of the proposed standing rules of the convention that the committee is to recommend, usually printed in the official program, should be handed to each person when he registers. Until the proposed standing rules are adopted, the convention is governed by the rules in the organization's parliamentary authority, such as those concerning the seating of delegates and alternates, see 58:16 through 17 and 59:2, and assignment of the floor, see especially 42:16. Presentation and adoption of convention standing rules. The report of the Committee on Standing Rules is presented to the convention immediately after the adoption of that of the Credentials Committee. As part of this report, the proposed rules are read in their entirety, unless the rules are not substantially changed from those adopted in the last few conventions, and every delegate has been provided with a copy when registering at the convention or previously, in which case the committee chairman or other reporting member may omit their reading. The report concludes by offering a motion such as the following. By direction of the Committee on Standing Rules, I move the adoption of the standing rules of the convention as printed, or as just read. For the procedure when the person presenting the report is not a voting member of the convention, see 59:12. The chair states the question by saying, "It is moved to adopt the standing rule of the convention as printed," or as just read. But any voting member of the convention then has the right to have the proposed rules read by the chair or secretary if they were not read by the committee chairman or other reporting member. After debate or amendment, if any, a single vote normally is taken on the complete body of rules. It should be understood, however, that although the rules may be organized to have the appearance of being a single document, they are in fact a group of separate main motions being offered by the committee under one enacting motion. Therefore, by the demand of a voting member of the convention, a separate vote can be required on any individual rule, see 1025 and 2710, and the procedure of seriatim consideration can be applied only if there is no objection, see 28. If a demand is made for a separate vote, which is advisable only if a serious matter appears to be at stake, the remainder of the rules are acted on first, and then those separated out are acted on individually. If an additional rule is proposed during the consideration of the committee's proposed rules, or later during the convention, it is similarly acted on separately after the committee's proposals have been voted on. In putting the question to a vote, the chair may initially omit reading the proposed rules. However, if they have not been read even once, any delegate then has the right to demand that they be read before the vote. Even if previously read, any delegate has the right at that time to demand the reading of any rule that has been amended since being read. A group of proposed standing rules requires a 2/3 vote for its adoption whenever it includes any rule that would require a 2/3 vote for its adoption if voted on individually. See next paragraph below. Therefore, under the usual procedure of voting on the standing rules as a package, a 2/3 vote will normally be required for their adoption. Because, if they are to fill the needs of the convention, they nearly always include provisions that can be opposed only by a 2/3 vote. Vote required for adoption of an individual rule. If a standing rule of a convention is voted on individually, the vote necessary for its adoption is in some cases 2/3, and in others a majority, depending on the nature of the rule. 1. Convention standing rules requiring a two-thirds vote for adoption, even individually, are, in principle, distinguished by the same characteristics as provisions which, in an ordinary local society or assembly, would need a two-thirds vote to be placed in effect for the duration of a meeting or session, or would require adoption as a special rule of order to continue in force from session to session. See 2. An example would be a rule limiting the time allowed for debate. Rules in this class are described by the term parliamentary standing rules in the convention as used by this book. 2. A standing rule is individually adoptable by a majority vote in a convention if it does not fall in class 1 above, and consequently could be adopted in a local assembly as an ordinary standing rule. See 2. Examples of such convention rules would be those relating to the wearing of badges or to the format in which written reports or resolutions shall be submitted. Vote required to amend or rescind a convention standing rule. To amend or rescind a standing rule of a convention requires a two-thirds vote or the vote of a majority of all the delegates or other voting members of the convention who have been registered, except that a rule individually adoptable by a majority vote can be amended or rescinded by a majority vote after notice on at least the preceding day. Suspension of a convention standing rule. Any standing rule of a convention, except one prescribing the parliamentary authority, can be suspended for a particular specified purpose by a majority vote, even if the rule required a two-thirds vote for its adoption. Under such a suspension, however, the applicable rules in the parliamentary authority prescribed by the bylaws or by a rule of the convention come into force, as if the standing rule had not been adopted. To suspend a convention standing rule, and also the general parliamentary rule normally applying to the same situations, requires a two-thirds vote, just as to suspend the general rule when no standing rule is involved. 25. Note: the reason why a parliamentary standing rule of a convention can be suspended by a majority vote, even though it requires a two-thirds vote for its adoption, is as follows. In the convention, parliamentary standing rules, which are in the nature of suspensions of the regular rules of order for the duration of the convention session, generally arise from a need to give the majority more power to transact business with minimum delay, even when the majority is not large enough to command a two-thirds vote. Since it is thus likely to reduce the protection of a minority greater than one-third, a parliamentary standing rule of a convention requires a two-thirds vote for its adoption. But since the same rule tends to protect a majority of less than two-thirds, such a majority should have the right to suspend the rules for a particular purpose and allow the regular rules of order to come into force. Back to reading. No standing rule of a convention can be suspended for the remainder of the session, and no standing rule which has only a single application can be suspended, since this would be equivalent to rescinding the rule, and the case would have to be treated accordingly. Sample set of convention standing rules. The standing rules of a convention must vary with its size, type, and responsibilities. While it is not possible to frame model rules which are universally applicable, the following sample set illustrates the nature of the standing rules adopted by many conventions. Standing rules of the blank, convention of blank. Rule 1A. The Credentials Committee, directly after the opening ceremonies of the first business meeting, note C 59, 10 through 11, back to reading, shall report the number of delegates and alternates registered as present with proper credentials, and shall make a supplementary report after the opening exercises at the beginning of each day that business continues. B. A member registered as an alternate may, upon proper clearance by the Credentials Committee, be transferred from alternate to delegate at any time during the continuance of business meetings. Rule 2. For admission to the Assembly Hall to facilitate identification and seating, members, alternates, and others shall be required to wear the badge issued by the Credentials Committee upon registration. Rule 3. A resolution offered by an individual member shall be in writing, signed by the maker and the seconder, each of whom shall be a voting member of the convention, and shall be sent directly to the desk of the recording secretary. Rule 4. Note regarding variations in the rules and practices of societies relating to the handling of resolutions at a convention, see 59, 68 through 75. Back to reading. A. All resolutions except those proposed by the Executive Board, or Board of Delegates, Board of Managers, etc., or by committees, and all recommendations made in reports of officers or committees of the convention that are not in the form of resolutions shall be referred without debate to the Resolutions Committee. Resolutions proposed by the Executive Board or by committee shall be presented by the Board or proposing committee directly to the convention. B. Each member who offers a resolution shall be given an opportunity to explain it to the Resolutions Committee if he so requests. C. The Resolutions Committee shall prepare suitable resolutions to carry into effect recommendations referred to it, and shall submit to the convention with the committee's own recommendation as to appropriate action. These and all other resolutions referred to the committee, except questions which the committee by a vote of two-thirds of its members may decide not to report. Note, see 59, 74 through 75. Back to reading. D. The convention by a majority vote may suspend this Rule 4 and may immediately consider a question, or may order the Resolutions Committee to report a question at a certain time, even if the committee has voted not to report it. Rule 5. No member shall speak in debate more than once on the same question on the same day, or longer than 2 minutes, without permission of the convention granted by a two-thirds vote without debate. Rule 6. All reports and other material for the permanent record of printed proceedings shall be in typing and immediately on presentation shall be sent to the recording secretary. Rule 7. Nominations for each office to be filled with the convention shall be limited to one nominating speech of 3 minutes and one seconding speech of 1 minute for each nominee. Rule 8. Notices for announcement to the convention shall be in writing, signed by the person or a proper representative of the persons under whose authority the announcement is issued, and shall be sent to the desk of the recording secretary. Rule 9. The rules contained in the current edition of Robert's Rules of Order Newly Revised shall govern the convention in all cases to which they are applicable, and in which they are not inconsistent with the bylaws of the Society, Federation, Association, etc., and these standing rules. Program Committee. The Program Committee plans and submits the proposed scheduled meetings, proceedings, and special events of the convention. When the program is adopted by the voting body with or without amendment, it becomes the order of business of the entire convention session. 41. The program also commonly includes, interwoven throughout the convention timetable, a series of addresses, forums, workshops, exhibits, tours, and other activities designed for membership training, motivational, or entertainment value. Responsibilities. The nature of a convention program committee's responsibilities is considerably more complex than for a committee of the same name in a local society that includes a program as a part of each meeting. The overall program must cover all aspects of the society's work and commitments on the level at which the convention is held, district, state, national, etc., reviewing the period since the preceding convention and anticipating the course of the society until the next convention. In addition to enabling the convention to handle all business that it should consider within the time available, the program should be of such nature as to stimulate each delegate to an evaluation of the society's policies, accomplishments, and opportunities, inasmuch as benefit from the convention to the general membership may depend largely on the impression that each local president or delegate transmits to the unit he represents. The program committee usually begins work soon after the preceding convention closes, and its duties continue throughout the convention that it plans so that it functions as virtually a standing committee of the organization. The program committee should work in close contact with the president and the parliamentarian. Planning the program. Although the program must come before the convention for adoption and can be amended by it, many details must be decided far ahead. Prior to the convention, the program committee must have the authority, sometimes with designated members of the executive committee or board of advisors, and often acting in cooperation with the convention arrangements committee, to engage outside speakers or entertainers, to work out an order of business allotting appropriate amounts of time to each subject, and to make all necessary advance arrangements. Some societies send a tentative skeleton program to the constituent units several weeks beforehand as part of the printed call to convention. The complete program that the committee expects to recommend should be printed at the latest practical time for handing to each person as he registers at the convention. The order of business for the complete series of convention's business meeting normally includes, in expanded form, the elements of the one followed in ordinary meetings of the society's constituent units. 41. In the case of the convention, however, greater detail and precision are necessary for two principal reasons. 1. Adherence to a prearranged schedule is imperative if the convention is to complete its work, timing being an especially important factor if there are to be features carried by radio and television at particular hours, addresses by government officials, or appearances by professional artists. 2. Each member has the right to know at which meeting and at what approximate time a particular matter can be expected to come before the convention, so that he may avoid absence from the hall during important debates or votes. Some organizations divide the printed convention program into two parts, the first of which gives the times and places of special events, and for each business meeting only the hours of the call to order, adjournment, and any scheduled recesses. The second part, listing the items or classes of business set for each meeting, is then known as the agenda. 41. While it is not possible to set out a model program that would be suitable for all conventions, the following principles are commonly applicable. 1. Notice of the times of registration should be given early, general distribution by mail or other means, and should also be printed in the convention program. Handing out with the program a schedule of pre-convention meetings of the board and of committees is often advisable, although the persons directly concerned with these meetings may need to be separately informed at an earlier time. 2. When the invocation is offered, the national anthem is played or sung, and the Pledge of Allegiance is recited in opening ceremonies. They should always be in that order, that is, the invocation first and the pledge last. 3. If there is an address of welcome, often given by a local public official at the opening of the convention, it should, as a matter of courtesy, be followed by remarks of acknowledgement and appreciation by the presiding officer. By the presiding officer or his designee on behalf of the organization. 4. For each meeting, the program should specify the hour of opening and closing, and the program or the agenda should specify the order in which the subjects or classes of subjects assigned to that meeting are to come up. The extent to which such classes are subdivided should be guided by the particular conditions and probable timing problems of the individual convention. Sufficient time should be allotted for thorough consideration of each important policy question that is expected to come before the convention. For such an item of business, it is frequently advisable to set for a particular hour, which automatically makes the matter a special order unless otherwise specified. See 4158 through 59. Listed subjects for which no hour is specified are general orders for the meeting to which they are assigned. 5. Reports of officers are commonly presented in the order in which the officers are listed in the bylaws, the president reporting first, unless it is the desire or practice of the organization to vary from such an order. Action on the report of the auditor should immediately follow the treasurer's report. Often reports of officers that are for information only and do not require action by the convention are printed and distributed in advance. In such a case, it may not be necessary to have the report read. The chair can simply pause for any questions by delegates to the reporting officer, and the reporting officer can make additional comments on his report at that time. The report of the board, if any, usually should follow up the reports of officers. 6. Reports of committees that are for information only and that do not require action by the convention should, as far as possible, be brought up in succession at the same point in the order of business. Time can frequently be saved by reproducing and distributing these reports in advance, in which case it may be unnecessary to read them aloud to the convention. The chair can then simply call the name of each committee in sequence, pausing for any questions. The chairman of any committee can be permitted to make additional comments upon his committee's report at that time. 7. The report of a committee having a resolution or other motion to offer can be received at any appropriate time, but it should usually be before the report of the resolutions committee. 8. A time for an announcement should immediately precede the adjournment of each meeting of the convention. 9. Beginning with the second day of the convention, unless a rule or resolution is adopted providing for the approval of the minutes of the entire convention by the board or committee, the minutes of the preceding day's meetings are read immediately after any opening ceremonies at the first meeting of each day. Authority to approve such minutes is then usually delegated to the board or to a special committee by means of a standing rule of the convention or even an adopted resolution introduced by the resolutions committee. 10. Business unfinished at the end of a day normally is taken up after the reading of the minutes or after the opening of the meeting, if the minutes are not read, at the resumption of business the next day, provided that the program makes no special provision for unfinished business on that day and there is no conflict with a special order. If unfinished business is not listed as such in the program each day, the planned timing should nevertheless allow for it. A listed heading of unfinished business should then be provided near the end of the last business meeting, and at any point where it is advisable because special orders have been scheduled early in the day. See also 41. 11. Nominations and the election of officers should take place relatively early in the convention, if possible, so that there will be time to complete balloting if more than one ballot must be taken. 12. If there is to be a formal installation of officers, the ceremony is often made a part of a closing banquet meeting, at which any presentations of gavels, pins, awards, or the like are also made. It is often advisable to schedule a meeting of the executive body or board of the association a day after the close of the convention, asking the board members and other necessary personnel to remain in the courtroom in the convention city for this purpose. If such a meeting is to be held, time and place may be announced in the printed convention program. Adoption of the convention program. The program is the president's guide as to the order of business during the initial proceedings, even before it has been formally adopted by the convention. Directly after the adoption of the standing rules, the report of the program committee is presented, normally by the committee chairman, somewhat as follows. Mr. President, a printed copy of the program, as prepared by the program committee, is in the hands of each registrant for the convention. By direction of the committee, I move the adoption of the program as printed. If the chairman or other person of presenting the report is not a voting member of the convention, he omits the motion for adoption. For procedure in such a case, see 5912. If last-minute changes in the program have become necessary, the chairman can make his report by saying, Mr. President, because of, and then briefly indicating his reasons, the program committee recommends the following modifications in its proposed program, which has been printed and placed in the hands of each registrant for the convention, followed by clearly stating each change with reference to page and line in the printed program. By direction of the program committee, I move that with these changes, the printed program be adopted. This motion is debatable and amendable. A majority vote adopts the program even if it contains special orders. While the making of a special order requires a 2/3 vote under ordinary circumstances, the situation is different in the case of a convention program, where the special order is part of a complete order of business being adopted for the current session. To change the program after its adoption requires a 2/3 vote or the vote of a majority of all the delegates or other voting members of the convention who have been registered, or unanimous consent, which can usually be obtained with no difficulty in cases where departure from the program is justified. Thus, an affirmative vote to adopt the program cannot be reconsidered. See 458 through 63. See also Program 4136, changing and taking up business out of its proper order. 4137 through 39. Change of the program to add additional meetings within the same session requires such a vote, except that during the last meeting scheduled by the program, an additional meeting may be set by a majority vote throughout the use of the motion to fix the time to which to adjourn. 22. Any proposed changes except those to which there is obviously no reasonable alternative are best referred to the program committee. The committee can recommend changes if and when it needs to while the convention is in progress, but neither the presiding officer nor the program committee is free to alter the program as adopted. which only the convention can do. For parliamentary rules applying at the expiration of the time allotted to a subject and procedure at scheduled times of adjournment, see 18.8, 21.10 through 12, 21.14, and 41.65 through 70. Convention Arrangements Committee. The complex arrangements necessary to a convention generally require the coordination of many additional details that are outside the province of any of the other committees mentioned in this chapter. In the simplest case, a convention arrangements committee is appointed usually by the board at the convention level. Most often, the committee's membership is largely made up of members of the constituent society or societies acting as convention hosts. It should, however, include persons who have had experience in similar work at prior conventions. In cases where there has been competition between cities for the convention site, it is often well to place in this committee local members who were instrumental in obtaining the selection of their city. The Convention Arrangements Committee may be empowered to consult experts who may include professional convention managers. Assistance frequently is obtainable also from staff members of hotels where conventions are held, and from convention bureaus in many cities. Depending on the size and duration of the convention, duties ordinarily assigned to the Convention Arrangements Committee are sometimes delegated to subcommittees or even distributed among separate committees. At the outset, the convention headquarters must be selected and advance arrangements made concerning room accommodations in as many hotels or motor inns as may be necessary. The committee may work with the Credentials Committee in coordinating room reservations for delegates with their registration for the convention, while the Program Committee may arrange for all speakers and entertainment. Details relating to the overnight and other accommodations for these guests are usually a responsibility of the Convention Arrangements Committee. Ensuring that dignitaries, not guests, are met at the airport or other point of arrival may also be one of the latter committee's functions. Printed or reproduced material assembled in cooperation with the Program Committee for distribution to the delegates in advance of the convention should include directions for getting to the convention by the various means of transportation available, and information about the locality, points of interest, restaurant, entertainment, tours arranged by the Program Committee, and parking facilities for those driving to the convention. Careful attention should be given to seating arrangements within the hall. Voting members should always be located in a separate section if other persons are assigned seating space on the convention floor. Pages, messengers, ushers, and doorkeepers, who are essential to the good order of all but the smallest conventions, should be trained to perform their duties in a calm and courteous manner. During the convention, liaison should be maintained with the Program Committee to ensure, for example, proper seating on the platform, as the needs may change from meeting to meeting. The staffing of an informational desk at the convention may lie with the province of the Convention Arrangements Committee, together with additional functions in the areas of communications and public relations. If the meetings are to be covered by the press, the representatives of the various media must be kept informed of developments and provided with an area on the floor near the platforms or in some other point of vantage in the hall. It is often helpful to have facilities for typing and copying close at hand, as well as for the distribution of literature. In very large conventions, it is wise to investigate existing telephone and other communications facilities to provide for their augmentation if necessary. Resolutions Committee. The Resolutions Committee, also sometimes called the Reference Committee, or in certain cases described below, the Platform Committee, has as its basic purpose the screening of all original main motions, 10, that have not been screened by another committee and that come or are to come before the convention. It is usually not intended to require purely formal or incidental main motions to be submitted to the Resolutions Committee or to refer resolutions reported to the convention by other committees. See also 51. Variations and rules relating to the Resolutions Committee. The establishment of a Resolutions Committee in a convention represents a limitation on the ordinary right of members to propose any number of motions from the floor without notice, such limitation arising from the need for keeping within a schedule and disposing of a large amount of business within a short time. The degree of limitation imposed and the manner in which a committee functions vary considerably, depending on the organization, in particular such as the following. Variations in the time a resolution can be introduced. In the simplest situation, a resolution is offered from the floor of the convention in the way it would be in an ordinary meeting. Such an arrangement is outlined in Standing Rules 3 and 4a and 59, 41 through 42. A place in the program or agenda should then be provided at each meeting, under headlines such as New Business, for the introduction of resolutions. Under the system, the proposer of the resolution says, "Mr. President, I move the adoption of," or "I offer the resolution which I have sent to the Secretary's desk." The Secretary reads the resolution announcing the names of the mover and the seconder, and the Chair says, "Under the rules of the resolution is referred to the Resolutions Committee." To save even this time in a convention, an arrangement can be made whereby resolutions are submitted to the recording secretary without being formally moved and read in open meeting, and the secretary then must promptly deliver them to the chairman of the Resolutions Committee. The convention can suspend such a rule at any time, however, by a majority vote if it is a standing rule of the convention, or by a 2/3 vote if it is a higher ranking rule, 221, and can thus take up a resolution without sending it to the Resolutions Committee. If many resolutions are customarily proposed by members, a permanent rule or provision in the bylaws can be adopted by the organization requiring all resolutions to be submitted to the committee or to the executive secretary for delivery to the committee a number of days, weeks, or even months in advance of the convention. This system can be arranged to allow time for signing copies of all resolutions considered by the Resolutions Committee to the constituent societies and their delegates in advance of the convention, thereby giving time for consultation and possibly instruction of delegates. In such cases, it is advisable to provide that resolutions can also be introduced at the convention if permitted by a two-thirds vote in the individual case. Variations in permitted origin of resolutions. In the ordinary case, only the members of the convention, that is, the delegates, are allowed to introduce resolutions for consideration by the assembly, and other members of constituent societies who are not convention members are allowed to speak for the purpose of suggesting motions only with the consent of the convention. Such consent can be granted in an individual case, or a rule can be adopted specifying persons who, in addition to the delegates, can submit resolutions. The latter practice has particular value when resolutions are required to be submitted in advance of the convention meetings. In some cases, any member of a constituent society, whether he is a delegate or not, is permitted to offer a resolution. In other organizations, a resolution is required to have the sponsorship of a constituent society itself. A number of organizations require even the resolutions offered by standing and special committees of the organization to be screened and reported by the Resolutions Committee. In some types of organizations, the Resolutions Committee originates and drafts its own resolutions for submission to the Assembly. In any society, when an officer or committee simply makes one or more recommendations, the Resolutions Committee is customarily send the task of putting the recommendations in the form of resolutions. Variations in the power of the Resolutions Committee. In the simplest arrangement, the Resolutions Committee has only the power to put resolutions in proper form, eliminate duplication where similar resolutions are offered, and ensure that all resolutions relating to a specific subject will be offered in a logical sequence. In other cases, the committee is given the authority to make substantive alterations in a resolution, but only with the sponsor's consent. While in still others, by vote of the committee, sometimes a two-thirds vote, the substance of the resolution can be altered and the resolution can be reported to the Assembly in the altered form as though the committee had originated it. Except as the rules may provide otherwise, the Resolutions Committee is required to report all resolutions referred to it, but the committee can, if it wishes, report a resolution with no recommendation. If the committee is given the power not to report a resolution, thus withholding it from consideration by the convention, a requirement of an unusually high vote within the committee, such as a 3/4 vote or a vote of 2/3 of the committee's members, should always be imposed, and the convention should always be given power to override such a decision of the Resolutions Committee and order the committee to report the resolution by a majority vote. See Rule 4D in the Sample Standing Rules of the Convention, 5942. In this connection, it should be noted that voting not to report a resolution, reporting it with no recommendation, and reporting it with a recommendation that it be rejected by the convention are each quite different. Platforms or policy statements. In political and certain other types of organizations, the Resolutions Committee is required to prepare and report a platform for adoption by the organization, setting forth its views, aims, and aspirations. Other associations occasionally require the committee to draft statements of policy or similar documents that take the form of a platform rather than of a resolution. In such a platform or statement, many of the principles applicable to drafting resolutions are followed. If there is a preamble, instead of beginning each paragraph with the word whereas, a participle is used thus, believing in the blank, etc. Each paragraph is terminated by a semicolon, and in the case of the next to the last paragraph, the word and. The last paragraph of the preamble may be followed by the word therefore. Each new paragraph of the preamble begins with another participle. In the body of the paper, each paragraph, instead of opening with the enacting words resolved that, begins with a verb denoting an attitude or position. For example, affirms, assures, condemns, calls upon, and the like. As in a resolution, no paragraph should contain a period within its structure. The paragraph of the body of the document can be linked by a semicolon and the word and, as in the preamble, or a semicolon only can be used. The first paragraph of the body of the statement is often somewhat general. The preamble and the body of the statement may be connected by words such as issues this statement of, and the full name of the organization can precede these words, or it can be placed before the preamble. For example, thus, believing blank, recalling blank, and noting blank, the Phoenix Improvement Association issued this statement of its basic governing principles and affirms blank, assures blank, and condemns blank. Or, the Phoenix Improvement Association, believing blank and holding blank, therefore issues the statement of its basic governing principles and affirms blank, assures blank, and so on. Courtesy resolutions. In addition to its duties in regard to the resolutions which are referred to it and which usually relate to the policy matters, the Resolutions Committee is often charged with the duty of drafting and presenting to the Assembly any courtesy resolutions that may seem appropriate. Ordinarily, courtesy resolutions express the appreciation of the Convention to those who arranged accommodations for its physical needs or rendered its service. Meetings of the Committee. Ordinarily, the Resolutions Committee should make known through the program or announcements the time and places it will meet. It is best to allow any sponsor of a resolution to appear before the committee to explain it and answer any questions about it, and interested delegates may also be allowed to attend and even participate in discussion. Many times such a discussion reduces friction that may have developed concerning a resolution, and the convention as a result goes more smoothly. After an open hearings of this type, the committee meets in executive session, 9, to review each resolution and prepare its report. The parliamentarian may be asked to attend the committee's meetings. Report of the Resolutions Committee. In reporting, the Resolutions Committee follows the procedure of any committee reporting back a resolution referred to it, as described in 51. Even resolutions are submitted to the committee before the opening of the convention. The report on each resolution is treated as if it had been moved and seconded in the assembly before being referred to the committee. It is never necessary for the Resolutions Committee chairman or reporting member to move the adoption of a resolution being reported, unless the committee itself originated it, as in the case of courtesy resolutions. When the committee recommends amendments to resolution, in case the board is not empowered to incorporate them itself, the chairman reports as follows. Resolutions Committee Chairman. Mr. President, the Resolutions Committee recommends that the resolution relating to, or resolution number 6, etc., be amended by striking out the words blank and inserting the words blank, and that as thus amended, the resolution be adopted. By direction of the Resolutions Committee, I move the adoption of the recommended amendment. If the convention members do not have reproduced copies of the resolution, the chair reads it before stating the question on the amendment. He then proceeds. The Resolutions Committee recommends the adoption of the resolution with the following amendment, followed by reading it. The question is on the amendment. In instances where it is advisable for a resolution of overriding importance to be considered as a special order rather than as a part of the main body of resolutions reported by the Resolutions Committee, this is arranged through liaison with the Program Committee. The chairman of the Resolutions Committee then reports the resolution at the time prescribed for it in the agenda. If desired, the committee's report can include a preliminary motion establishing special rules for the consideration of the resolution, similar to the practice of the U.S. House of Representatives. The following is an example of such a rule. Resolved that at the time prescribed in the agenda, the resolution relating to blank be considered as a special order, the general debate to be limited to 2 hours and equally divided between and controlled by Mr. A, the leader for the affirmative, and Mr. B, the leader for the negative, that at the expiration of general debate, the resolution shall be open to amendment. Debate on said amendments to be limited to 2 minutes for each member. Under such a rule, the leaders for the two sides are recognized alternately by the presiding officer and can speak then themselves or yield the floor to other members for a portion of the time at their disposal. The leaders are usually the more ardent or persuasive advocates of the two positions, and frequently they speak first and save themselves enough time so that at the end they can close debate for their side. An alternative procedure is to assign a longer period of debate to Mr. A and Mr. B and require other members to adhere to a shorter limit. Often, it is helpful to require general debate to be conducted first before amendments are allowed, but this provision can be dispensed with.